So if you're watching these videos in the order in which I have them presented on the website, you know that my first job right out of college was in the corporate marketing department for a regional bank in Indiana. And it didn't take long for me to find myself as the right-hand woman for our director of marketing who sat on the executive leadership team. Now, every executive leadership team member had a right-hand woman, a woman that they would go back to and engage when it was time to get some big initiatives in place. Because see, we were the ones that knew how to make things happen. So all of us were brought together when there were big initiatives that needed to take place and needed to be executed. Things like mergers and acquisitions, Y2K, new systems and processes, anything big, they would pull all of us together and we would make it happen. And I thoroughly loved being on this team of women because we were all very similar in age, education, experience, work ethic. We were all very, very like-minded, and we thoroughly enjoyed working together. That said, there was one thing that really bothered me, and it was this. When it came time to report on our activities, there were only 2 women who were ever invited to go to the executive leadership team and report on our behalf, and I wasn't one of them. And that really bothered me. It was always Amy and Desiree. Now, fortunately at the time, I had built a really, really solid relationship with the one woman who sat on the executive leadership team. Her name was Joan. And I loved her because she was a straight shooter. She never beat around the bush, and she was experienced, and she would tell it like it was. So I thought to myself, I'm going to ask her what I need to be doing differently to be the one that's invited. Because see, when I grew up, my parents taught me that if there is something somebody has and you want it, then you need to find out what they are doing differently than you to get it. So I went to Joan and I said, listen, it's always Amy, it's always Desiree. What do I need to do to be the one that's invited? Now I was really excited because I knew that whatever came back from Joan was going to be something that I could act on. So I was anxiously awaiting her response. And here's what she said. She looked at me and she said, Starla, that's pretty simple. You don't look like they do. Now in my head, I was thinking, excuse me? I grew up in a middle-class family in a Midwestern town. And I was taught that all you had to do was work hard and produce great results, and you will be acknowledged and rewarded. And then when I got to college, I was told the same thing. Not once did anyone ever tell me that my looks would matter. And now this lady standing across from me telling me that? Now that's what was going on inside my head. But I thought to myself, well, you asked. You can't get mad at the answer. So I looked at Joan and I just basically said, okay, you're going to have to help me understand what you're talking about because that's not the response that I was expecting. And she said, Starla, it's pretty simple. Listen, go look at Amy and Desiree. They look like business women. And then look at yourself in the mirror. You look like a college student. You're still dressing like a college student. And here's why that's a problem. Those men in that boardroom, they're old enough to be your grandfather. So when they look at you, what they see is their granddaughter. And it would be incredibly awkward to have their granddaughter in the boardroom with them. So if you want to be in that boardroom, then you need to look like you deserve to be in that boardroom. And I thought, well, okay. So the next day I invited Amy and Desiree out to lunch. And I not so subtly leaned over and said, hey, those are some nice suits. Where'd you get them? Because I had never purchased business clothing ever in my life, ever. But they told me that they bought them at Lazarus, and that's just the local department store at the time. Lazarus, of course, has since been bought out by Macy's. But that's where they bought their suits, and they told me that most of the time they buy Casper suits, which I guess at the time were all the rage. So that weekend, I went and I spent a couple of hours finding 6 suits. I thought I'd buy 6 so that I always had one at the dry cleaners and then the other 5 available to wear during the week. And I pulled out the credit card that my parents told me was only to be used in the time of emergencies. And I thought to myself, all right, Mr. Credit Card, this is a professional emergency. So I bought just under $1,000 worth of business suits, which for me was the biggest clothing purchase I had ever made in my life. And it made me so sick to my stomach to do that. But I thought I need to look like a businesswoman, and businesswomen wear suits. So I started wearing these suits every single day. And this is no joke, no exaggeration, no lie. Within 6 months, guess who was invited to present at her first executive leadership team meeting? It's the truth. This was a powerful life lesson for me because this is when I was reminded that your outside packaging is quietly speaking to everyone, and it's telling them 4 things. First, it's telling them who you are. Now, my outside packaging prior to that was telling that those men that I was a college student and I was the age of their granddaughter, which is the truth. But I wasn't a college student. The age thing was the truth, but I wasn't a college student anymore. But the second thing our appearance tells people is what we think is important, what we value. We can send really strong messages about what is important to us using our appearance. The other thing that our outside packaging tells the world is how we feel about ourselves. How we dress ourselves is a very subtle message regarding how we view ourselves. And then the fourth and final thing is it sends a really strong message to the world as to how we expect to be treated. That was my powerful life lesson at that point. That's when I realized, hey, if all the substance inside you says you are a businesswoman, then you need to make sure that on a daily basis, you're showing up looking like a businesswoman as well. You need to look, act, and sound like what you know you are on the inside. And as soon as I started doing that, the world, including those men, responded in kind. So I'm sharing this story with you because this was just one of the many powerful life lessons that enhanced my obsession with understanding human behavior, and most importantly, learning how to leverage human behavior to accomplish our goals. And that's what I do with my executive coaching, beyond enhancing the substance that people walk in the door with, because substance or style without substance will only get you so far. So let's be clear. Who you are on the inside, your character, and all of the value that you bring is number one, important. Number one, important. However, if you don't leverage everything on the outside to make sure that the message of who you are is authentically and accurately communicated on the outside, you're leaving money and your goals on the table. So that's another one of those powerful life lessons that I thought, wow, this is just why I do what I do. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. I am so happy that you're paying attention to these videos. And most importantly, I hope that as you walk away from these videos and these stories, you're walking away with some value, some little nuggets of information that you can put into play for yourself and enhance your game and get to where you want to get in life. So anyway, thank you so much. As you know, there are more to come.